Hello guys, this is Goodlike, and today I am doing a sort of a look back into the first day of the closed beta for RaiderZ, or Raiders, or whatever you want to call it. I've decided to make some videos about Raiders, and I think the best way to do that is to describe my experience as a beta test pretty much every single day of how it went. What was wrong, what was good, etc. And we'll see where this goes. So for starters, the beta test already had some issues even before it began. There was this error. Basically the game would try to download a patch, it would probably fail somehow and it wouldn't be able to patch anymore. And would throw you an error that the patch was corrupted or missing or something like that. It was solved pretty soon. I think it was solved like not 10-15 minutes after the actual launch at, what was it, 5 PM CET, which is 6 PM in my country. Anyway, they made a hotfix. The basic steps are to uninstall your game if you ran it, install it again. Thank God I saved those files, even though it's just 3 GB, but you know my internet. And then install the hotfix without running the game. Keep in mind that the install will ask you to run the game at the end of installation. You shouldn't do that. That's not good. I'm pretty sure that they will have fixed it already, so you won't have any issues. But I'm just saying this just in case you still need the hotfix. The hotfix worked for me. I've heard that it hasn't worked for other people in Facebook, but it definitely worked for me, so it definitely could work for you as well. Another massive bug that actually happened with the Raiders was actually quite a ways into the game. One of the instances, possibly the first instance, wouldn't work for some reason. If you entered that instance, your character would basically bug out. You would just be running around the world, but nothing would interact with you anymore. And if you logged out in that state, which you had to do, I believe, by shutting down your program, you wouldn't be able to log back in. From what I've heard, this has been resolved already in live servers, and as I launched the game, I was finally connected to the game and managed to enter the instance. But whether additional bugs are present there, I will only be able to tell you after today's testing experience. They fixed it quite fast. I'm not sure when exactly. It definitely wasn't yesterday because I was still up at like late night. I even leveled the second character all the way to that dungeon, and the problem is that dungeon you need to go through it in order to progress the storyline, so it was quite annoying having your character stuck at level 7, but at least it gave me a chance to look at all the various customization options and to create myself a badass berserker which looks exactly like Wolverine from X-Men. This is practically a carbon copy, like I'm telling you. The hair is a bit more centered, perhaps, but when you're wearing a hat, you definitely wouldn't be able to tell him from the real Logan. It's funny, because the character's name is also Logan. About the actual gameplay, I kind of liked the melee gameplay, so I stuck with it. I tried out the casters a little bit, like I didn't even get past 1 level, because they were very similar to actual melee gameplay, except that you had spells on top of swinging your sword. I don't know, I might try it out later. I probably will if I ever reach max level with these characters. I just didn't want to run all the same 7 levels over and over and over again with every character for now. I'll do that later, definitely. But currently I find magic really slow. I didn't like it very much, even though it's actually pretty interesting because you have to actually aim. If you don't aim, you're gonna miss. So it is quite cool, and I'd probably enjoy it in the long run when I'd have many spells, but until that point it's a bit too samey. But I'm sure just a matter of a few minutes of sitting down and trying it out properly. My main character that I made was simple sword and board, defender dude, I think that's how they call defenders. I quite like the gameplay with all the dodges and blocks and attacks. I've not had the chance to play Guild Wars 2, but it does feel a little bit more actiony than Guild Wars 2, although slightly slower, which is, I suppose, kind of a good thing if it picks up the pace in the later levels. At the start, the high-speed pace is necessary, you just get used to your abilities. I just want to see how exactly it works later when you have all the abilities and you can change them and stuff like that. Right now it's a bit slow, but we'll see. We'll see. It's too early to judge. I just got to level 7. That's not even level 10, and level 10 is, I think, where you practically enter the tutorial stuff and you can get like multi-classing. I'm not gonna try multi-classing at the start. I want to focus on one class and see what it has to offer, and we'll possibly do some multi-classing later on down the line if needed and if it looks good. The questing experience was quite simple. I'm not sure if it's just a tutorial or anything, but it's your basic experience. Go kill dudes and collect stuff. But the good thing about it is that the fighting itself with the mobs is quite dynamic. In a sense, it's not too difficult. I mean, it's just still move out of the stuff that the enemies do, but they do tend to have varying attacks and varying speeds of said attacks. There's also obviously the epic mobs, which you have to also kill for quests. I think the problem with them was that simply the server was really crowded. When I started playing like really late night, just to level my new character, it felt much better. It was much more interesting to actually try to solo, or at the very least have one person maximum helping you at the same time. The fights are much more interesting when they take quite a while. I think that a really good suggestion would be some sort of system that dynamically adjusts either the health or the power or something of the mobs, at least the epic ones, based on how many people are fighting them. Because right now it's very easy to kill these epic mobs if you have like 5 dudes. 5 dudes, that mob stands no chance. He's not even gonna hurt anybody. He's gonna be knackered and annihilated. Even 3 dudes already is overkill. 2 dudes, if they go from the start, is about right. Soloing takes a bit of time and a bit of thinking, moving in the right direction, but definitely not impossible, and I quite liked it. So it definitely needs some sort of buff towards the epic monsters, but only if there's multiple people. Not if they're just roaming on their own and you're soloing them. That isn't necessary. I also got a quest where you were turned into the spirit and you get new abilities. It's kind of like a buff where you simply either carry a different weapon which you can pick up from your dead enemies, or in this case you get turned into a spirit which also has its own weapon and gets new abilities for a certain amount of time. That's how it basically works. It's a really interesting mechanic, but I much prefer the short duration ones to the long duration spirit quest. For example, which is also a good example, if you kill the trolls at level 6-7 on the beach, you can destroy their backpacks that they have, massive things on the back, like huge pots full of fish, and then fish will drop out of them and you can use that fish to fight. You can only use it like for 15 seconds or something, which is a bit sad. I'd like to be a bit longer, like about 30 seconds or something. I mean, it doesn't happen often enough. I only had like once a good streak where every single one of them dropped it and I could just use chain chain use the fish to kill them. With fish, by the way, the tuna is incredibly overpowered. You should definitely pick it up if it drops. But I much preferred such style to just getting straight up 5-minute different combat buff. Especially because the combat was like significantly different from what I was playing. It was always static for every character. It was basically two-hander combat instead of one-hander plus sword, which is already quite slow, and two-hander is even slower. So I didn't like the fact that I had to use it like for 5 minutes and just keep using that. I would have preferred simply picking up like the weapons from the enemies that you defeat. Perhaps defeating one enemy and then using his weapon, because the enemies in that quest are like statues. They have huge hammers. You could use that against like golems and stuff like that. Just using that generic spirit, it doesn't feel nearly as appealing as more dynamic weapon switching mechanics. Anyway, enough about that. That was still pretty good for all that it was. I'm coming up to the end of the video, I suppose, and I'll just make now a short list of small things that I've noticed that I'd like to fix, if there are any, naturally. So first of all, wrapping text on buttons. Very obvious. You could see it in multiple windows that the text is not wrapped. It's probably still there from the Korean localization. I mean, you know, Korean, Japanese and all those languages. They have very short words graphically because they use massive images to represent big parts of the word. So they don't need that much space. They don't need to wrap. But for us it is necessary to do so. Naturally, of course, there's also some Korean characters remaining here and there. It's just a localization thing. I'm sure it's being fixed as we speak. Speaking more of localization, some of the translations are very, very generic, and I wouldn't call them inaccurate. I'd call them too accurate. They're word-for-word translations where a more subjective translation would make more sense. For example, this: there is no SP. It would sound much better if you would have something like this: you have no stamina left, or you have no SP left, instead of just this weird saying, there is no SP. It just doesn't feel like a natural way of expressing the fact that I'm out of stamina. Another thing about text is that sometimes the quest complete message obstructs the actual quest text, and it doesn't disappear for quite a while, causing me to wait if I want to read what the hell the quest is about, which is quite a shame. This could be once again a wrapping issue or something due to the really long quest names. If not, then I would suggest to put the quest complete message a layer below the quest text message in the dialogue stuff or something, because right now it's just annoying when you're trying to read the quests and it obstructs the first few lines and you can't read the start. If it at least obstructed the bottom parts, then you could just read, and by the time you got to the part where it's obstructed, the message would have disappeared by then and you would be able to continue reading without any problem. Other minor things that I didn't like or found missing: there was no proper comparison between items. Like, if you mouse over an item and you have something of that equipped, you would see it in a window next to the first item. The problem, however, was that all you would see would be the actual stats on the item. Now, this is fine now, but I assume that when the stats are going to become much more diverse, you will most likely have some sort of issues comparing two items just trade based off the stats that they have. It would be much better to have some sort of detailed menu telling you which stats you gain, which stats you lose if you equip this item. Like, for example, this weapon would give you plus this much damage and plus this much magic damage, or plus this much of this stat, maybe minus this much of this stat. Like I said, right now this doesn't seem like a big issue, but if the stats on items will grow, and from what I've seen they do grow to quite the size, then obviously you will have some issues. A very small thing, there is a cutscene that is played after you craft the first item with your blacksmith. What I didn't like about that was that first you had to wait for the item to craft and then you had the cutscene. It only happened once so far. It hasn't happened again. I'm not sure if it'll happen ever again. Maybe just one time thing, but I would have preferred that that first crafting time would have been done under the cutscene at the same time, so I wouldn't have to wait twice for something. It's a small tiny thing, just saying, it's not a big deal at all. Accepting the quests sometimes takes quite a few button presses. I would prefer some sort of unified way to simply accept the quest on the first screen. I mean, when I level the first character, fine, I want to read through most of the quests anyway, it's not a problem. But most likely if I'll be playing multiple characters, I want some sort of quicker way to accept all the quests, so I don't have to keep pressing all those buttons over and over again, like 11111A, 11111A, 11111A. I want just press one button. Hey, there, I've got this quest. If I want to read about it, I open my journal and I can read it there. Right now what you have is your basic quest text from the character, possibly additional quest text from the character, just something else to say and it doesn't fit in one window for some reason. And then you also have another journal page on top in which you can finally accept the quest. It's just a lot of button presses and they are unnecessary in my opinion. Speaking about button presses, also quite a few quest items, for example the cannonballs or the glyphs, require you to not only interact with the item but also then pick it up. I think that's a little bit clunky. If possible, it would be better if just interacting with those items would be sufficient for them to be picked up at the same time. Once again, it's really not a big deal, just like with the quests. It's just I think that it would save the button presses for people, and that's always a good thing, isn't it? And two more things. First, the fact that you cannot see all the ranks of your skills as you are talenting up. You can see the rank that you're going to learn if you add a talent point, so you can make a decision whether you want it or not. However, at the same time, you don't really know how actually powerful that ability would be with each coming rank. So I don't really know if I want to invest into it more. Should I invest into other abilities because they will have like vastly superior bonuses for 5 points or something. I can't know this without actually putting like at least 4 points into the 5-point talents. And due to the restrictions and stuff, it will take a while to get there. I mean, at the first levels you don't really have much choice because you're limited into where you can put your talent points. But as you keep leveling, I'm sure you'll have much more choices to where to put the talents. But you simply won't be able to make an educated decision because you won't see what the actual abilities are. You'll have to look it up somewhere on the internet and see that, oh yeah, this talent at 5 points does this much damage, etc, etc. I'd prefer this to be in-game somewhere. And finally, I didn't like the fact that moving with the AWSD closes the menus. I think this should be an option rather than mandatory at the moment. At the moment all the menus will close, like your inventory, your character screen I believe. Your map overlay won't close, but everything else will. And for someone who's like been playing WoW and stuff, the menus don't really obstruct my view too much, so I really don't have a problem with them being there as I move, especially if I predict where I go. But of course it might be different for other people, so I think this would be one of those things that should be toggleable, like specifically that whether you want your menus to close as you move or not. I looked into the options, but I haven't found anything. Anyway, this is it, the experience from day 1. I'm sure the rest of the videos won't be nearly as long as this one, because this one is probably friggin' bajillion hours long because there's so many things to say because, well, it's the first day. I've gotten all the basic stuff out of the way. I'm sure the rest of the days will be shorter. I haven't had the chance to experience quite a few things like the enchanting, which I heard was bugged. I've heard some people having some frame drop issues. However, on my system, which you can see on my channel information, if you click more at the bottom, it's there. It ran pretty well even while recording. Like I had around 100 FPS most of the time. If the area was incredibly crowded, it would sometimes drop to as low as like 50, 60, but never less than that. It could go up as high as 130 in low crowded areas and stuff. And do keep in mind that this is with everything bumped to the max in the options, and also everything unlocked in the NVIDIA control panel to the max as well. So basically, yeah, there are a few small things that I'd like to see change if possible, but in general I quite enjoyed the gameplay so far, and I'll definitely be playing more. Also, you can pick up cannons and fire them at people at point blank range, practically instantly killing them. Just in case you were wondering how fucking awesome this game is.